Huh. I'm talking about another Roblox game, really. I didn't think I'd make another video talking about another Roblox game right after I made a video talking about Darkest Hour. Um, but here I am talking about another Roblox game, but this time it's about an Asym that is known as Crimson Chronicles. Now, this game actually has been out for quite a while now, but the issue was, I actually played this game during the time when there was only 2 killers and 3 survivors. You know, way before the big update came out. And ever since the big update came out, the game not only got, actually got more player base now, unlike before where the game was really dead. So I couldn't really play the game that much beforehand because the game was just really dead. But now the game is, has gotten a little bigger. Not big still, but like it's gotten a player base, that's for sure. Um, this game is called Crimson Chronicles. Crimson Chronicles is a asymmetrical horror game where there's one killer versus, well, many different survivors. Each killer and survivors have their own separate abilities and such. So I'm going to talk about the gameplay first, and then I'll go ahead and talk about, well, the characters in the game. So let's get started with the gameplay first. So the gameplay is pretty much just like any other asymmetrical horror game. Survivors have to do the objective to decrease down the timer, while the killer has to, well, kill survivors. Pretty self-explanatory. I don't think I really need to say much about it. But enough talk about the gameplay. Let's talk about, well, the characters. The survivors and killers. However, in Crimson Chronicles, the survivors in this game are called protagonists, while the killers in this game are called the antagonists. So, interesting names for which side. But we're going to be talking about the protagonists first, and then we will talk about, well, the actual antagonists. In this case, the killers. So, let's get started, shall we? To start things off, we're starting off with the first starter survivor, T.S. Terry. T.S. Terry is your first starter survivor. He's got only 2 abilities. Let's start with his stats first. He has 100 stamina and 100 health. So, yeah. Now we get to his abilities. His first ability is, well, attack. When used, T.S. Terry will, well, attempt to punch. If he successfully punches the antagonist will get stunned. And then it goes on cooldown. If you miss the punch, however, you will end up getting the slowness effect. That's enough with the attack ability. Now we get to his other ability, the med bottle. What this ability does is it's pretty much just a self-heal. I don't really need to give much explanation of that. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's just a self-heal. However, you are slow when using it, so use it when you're not in danger. However, even though it only has 1 usage, you can actually get another usage of the med bottle by simply punching the killer. I think you have to punch the killer 2 times to get another med bottle. Considering, I really had to punch the killer twice, and just then I noticed I have 2 med bottles instead of 1. So you have to punch the killer 2 times in order to get another med bottle. So overall, not a bad starter survivor. Basic, but not a bad starter survivor. Let's get on to the next protagonist. The next survivor we'll be talking about is actually another starter survivor. The second starter survivor in this game. Whatever her name is. So, Fior, or For, whatever, I'm sorry if I'm butchering her name, but yeah, she's the second starter survivor. Now, unlike T.S. Terry, who is more like a stunner and somewhat a survivalist in a sense, she's more of a mix between a support, mainly just support really. She does have a second ability though that she can use to defend herself. Anyways, let's get to her stats. So for starters, she has 90 health, and of course 100 stamina. Now we get to her abilities. Her first ability is Healing Drone. When used, it will give you the option to click on, well, the names of the survivors and which survivor you want to heal. However, you need to be in close range of a certain survivor in order to be able to, well, start healing them. If you are within range of a certain survivor and click on their icons, you can start. The drone will start flying towards them and will pretty much heal them. This is pretty good, especially when you want to save your teammate's life from, well, danger. And now that I think about it, this is actually one of the only Asyms. Well, there's probably more Asyms than that. This is one of the few Asyms where you can actually like help your teammates, like actually heal your teammates and help them without, like obviously you still gotta risk, dealing with the killer and such. But unlike most Asyms where you really have to like risk running into the killer most of the time, this one you still gotta risk worry about the killer. But as long as you're out of there, as long as you're not in the way, you can definitely get value with the healing drone without much issue. Now we get to her last ability. Fuck. What does that read? Body of Steel. Right. The Body of Steel. Body of Steel is pretty much a block. When used, she will, well, attempt to block. And if the killer hits her block, she gains a small speed boost. I think that's how it works. I don't know. I don't play this girl that much. However, if you miss the block, I think you get slowed down. I'm pretty sure you get slowed down. Again, I don't play as this character that much. But yeah, that's pretty much all I gotta say about, well, Fior, or again, sorry if I'm butchering her name. But that's pretty much all I gotta say about this woman. Anyways, let's talk about the third Star Survivor. Yes, there's another Star Survivor. Alright, so the third Star Survivor is Capsule. I think, yeah, Capsule. The third and last starter, well, protagonist. This one is more like, unlike the other two protagonists that usually have two abilities, Capsule has three abilities. And from one of the looks of it, he's more like a survivalist more than anything else, really. Although he still can attempt to help his teammates, he kind of plays more like a survivalist in a sense. Actually, more like a survivalist slash support, really. Anyways, let's talk about his stats and his, well, abilities. So, his stats. Obviously, 100 stamina and 90 health, just like the other survivor. Huh. Interesting. Now let's go over to his three abilities. Capsule's first ability is Beast Soda. If you played Baldi's Basics, you pretty much know how the Beast Soda works. When used, he will attempt to, well, shoot out a Beast Soda. If it hits the killer, it just simply pushes them back. Pretty self-explanatory. Again, if you played Baldi's Basics, you pretty much would know how the Beast Soda works. And also, I also want to bring up another thing is that Capsule is pretty much based around the student from Baldi's Basic. Or pretty much, I guess you could say a Baldi OC or whatever. Anyways, next ability is Dirty Chalk. When used, Capsule will poof out and become invisible while covering a certain small area with a white chalk fog, which can confuse the killer in a sense, and it also makes you almost invisible. You can also use it on your teammates as well to turn invisible as well. So not only can you use that ability to save yourself, but you can also use it to save your teammates as well. Well, kind of. Again, I said you're almost invisible. If the killer somehow has good eyesight, they can still see you pretty well, even if you're invisible. So be more considerate about how good the antagonist's eyesights are. But that's all I gotta say about Dirty Chalk. Oh yeah, another thing I want to bring up about Dirty Chalk, it only has two uses. So if you use it twice, yeah, you can't use it again. Next up is Zesty Bar. When you, well, eat the Zesty Bar, I'm assuming it's supposed to heal you HP. I'm assuming that's what it does. I think it's either refreshes your stamina or heals you HP. I don't know. Again, I do not play as this character that much. But I'm assuming it's supposed to do like it does in Baldi's Basics. It, gives you back more stamina. Other than that, it probably heals you. I don't know. I'm assuming it heals you or it gives you back stamina, like in Baldi's Basics. But anyways, that's pretty much all I gotta say about Capsule. And the last starter protagonist. Yes, now we actually get the protagonist that actually requires you to grind the game in order to unlock. So, yeah, let's get to the last two protagonists in this game now. Alright, so on to one of the purchasable survivors this time. Yes, a survivor you actually have to unlock. This one is Guabo. Guabo is a mix between a support and, of course, a survivalist. So, let's go to his stats and his abilities. First off, his stats. Of course, 100 stamina as usual and 90 health. It's hard to notice a pattern. Most of the protagonists, except for like two, have like 90 health. But anyways, yeah. So Guavo is a mix between a survivalist and a support. So let's go over to his first ability, banana stand. When used, Guavo will place down a banana stand, which will allow other survivors, also known as your teammates, to interact with the banana stand in order to eat a banana. Once they eat a banana, they heal themselves some health, while also giving you access to your second ability, the banana. Now, honestly, I never used the banana ability because I didn't really get any value from the banana stand. So again, I don't really know. I'm assuming it's a self heal. If I'm correct, it's a self heal. I hope I'm right on that. Again, I don't really play most of these protagonists that much. But like, considering banana stand, you're helping your teammates eat a banana, and then there's regular banana where you just eat a banana yourself. Again, I'm assuming that's exactly what it's supposed to do. Now we get to his last ability, Bye Bye. Now, how this ability works is kind of weird. So, also another thing I want to bring up as well with banana stand, it only has one usage, but you can pick it back up as Guavo yourself. However, I'm assuming if it gets destroyed by the killer, you lose the ability, I think? Like, permanently? I don't know. Again, I don't play as this character that much. I really only played him once. Anyways, let's get to his last ability, Bye Bye. Now, as I stated, the way the ability works is weird. So, basically, it's like a teleport, right? Basically, how it works is that Guabo, he'll stand still, he'll look around, he'll wave his hand, and then he just teleports. However, how Bye Bye works is that you only teleport to the banana stand. So, as long as your banana stand is still out there, you will only teleport to the banana stand. Otherwise, the ability will not work. Anyways, that's pretty much all I gotta explain about how Guava works. Now let's get to the last protagonist, and by far, personally, my most favorite protagonist of them all. Needles the Porcupine. Not only my most favorite survivor to play as, but also the most fun survivor I enjoy playing as the most. He is actually really fun when you actually are really good at using his abilities. And yes, I know for a fact he's a Sonic OC. That's really why I main him. I really main him because of the fact that he's really based around Sonic the Hedgehog. Because originally, it was supposed to be Sonic the Hedgehog in Chronicles. He was supposed to be added in the game originally, but instead he got replaced by, a Sonic OC. In this case, Needles the Porcupine. Now, I'm pretty sure there's a reason for that. Copyright. Anyways, regardless though, still cool to see a Sonic-based character in Asym. Even though it's not Sonic the Hedgehog, it's still cool regardless, considering I'm a huge Sonic fan. Well, yeah. But anyways, let's talk about Needles, his stats, and his abilities. And we're going to talk about his passive. So, Needles is not only a stunner, but also a staller as well. So, a mix between both. Now we get to his stats. He has 100 health and 100 stamina. Now we get to his two abilities. So his first ability is Burst. When used, Needles will pull out a star, I'm assuming, and he will start running quite fast. Not super duper fast, but definitely fast enough to somewhat outrun the killer. However, even when using the burst ability, you still waste stamina. So definitely use that ability wisely at your own risk. And another thing about burst is that, well, if you notice that small star bar in the bottom of the screen? That is basically your bar that you need to have fill up in order to use burst. So how burst works is this little bar on the bottom of the screen. When you're using burst, it will drain the bar. If the bar is too low, you cannot use the ability. If the bar is high enough, you can start using the ability. Now, in order to fill up that little bar on the bottom of the screen, you need to get value from his second and definitely the most fun ability in the whole game, in my opinion, Crack Shot. How Crack Shot works is that Needles will go into a battle stance, and you will be able to aim where you want to, fly at. If used again while in your stance, Needles will fly right towards the killer and attempt to kick the killer. Now, there's actually two ways you can kick the killer. You can kick them in close range in order to, slow them down a bit, or you can kick them for a farther distance and stun the killer. So, if you kick the killer with Crack Shot while the killer is a little close, it will only give them slowness, but you do fill up that little bar on the bottom of the screen. The burst bar is what I'm just going to call it. However, if you manage to actually get a long shot with Crack Shot, you will stun the killer and it will fill up your burst bar even further. So, Neil is not only a fun character, but he also has pretty high skill ceiling, and I really love it. And the fact that I main Needles, because again, he's really based around Sonic the Hedgehog, and again, I'm a Sonic fan, so of course I'm going to be maining him. Not only is, again, he actually takes some skill to get used to, he's also really, really fun to play as. Like, when you actually get good at using him, he is definitely the most fun survivor. That is why I enjoy playing as Needles. Not only do I main him, I really love playing as him because he's actually really fun to play as. Especially getting those Crack Shot plus value. God, hitting those suns with Crack Shot is satisfying. Alright, enough Needles glazing. It's time to get to the bigger bad boys of this game. The antagonist. Starting things off with the very first starter antagonist. The first starter killer in this game, Tofu. So, let's go over to his, stats and his abilities. First thing I want to bring up is that Tofu, despite being the starter killer, along with another starter killer that we'll get into, I think the second one is a starter killer still, I don't know. Tofu is the more basic one of them all. However, he does actually take some skill at least to get good with, or not really, considering, again, if you're really good at managing your stamina, you don't really have to worry about using abilities too much. Obviously, still use your abilities on certain occasions, but if you're good at managing stamina, like how I am in most Asyms, it won't really be an issue for you. So, let's start with his stats. He has 600 health and 105 stamina. Now we get to his abilities. Her first ability is Headbutt, or Headbat. I'm not going to say Headbat or Headbutt. Obviously, pretty self-explanatory. It's a basic attack. You attack, and you deal 20 damage. Now we get to his second ability, Roll. When used, Tofu will start rolling. And of course, it is hard to steer, so make sure you're good at aiming with this thing. If you end up hitting a survivor, you will deal damage to them. However, if you miss and run out of time to hit a survivor, you get slowed down for quite a bit. Now we get to his third ability, Anguish. It's basically when used, Tofu will stand still, play a sound cue, and reveal the locations of the protagonist. Now we get his last ability. Probably the most satisfying ability to use, along with Roll, Saw Blade. When used, Tofu will pull out a saw blade, and he will draw it. You can also aim where you want to draw it before he ends up drawing it. When it hits a survivor, it will damage them, and it will also inflict bleed on them, making them basically bleed like crazy. And which is pretty good considering you start comboing the crap out of survivors afterwards and just pretty much mess them up. Overall, Tofu, despite being one of the starter killers, is actually pretty good when you utilize him well. When utilized very well, he is a really good killer. Oh, and another thing I do want to bring up before we get to the next killer, I really love the killers in this game, as they actually feel like something that a killer should be in an Asym, the power role. In Asyms like Outcome Memories, or even in this case, Forsaken, sometimes the killer role just feels very weak in a sense, even when you know how to utilize him because of how survivor-sided those two games tend to be. However, with Crimson Chronicles, the same can be said. A good team can easily destroy the killer. However, unlike Forsaken and Outcome Memories, the killer can actually make a comeback if they are actually really good at playing as this said killer and utilizing their abilities and pretty much overall. Overall, Tofu is actually a pretty good starter killer. Now, let's go up to the next starter killer, the second and last starter killer in Crimson Chronicles. That's right, Granny. Granny. A horror character that I never thought would make an appearance at all in an Asym is actually in a Roblox Asym, in this case, Crimson Chronicles. Granny is the second and last starter antagonist in the game. She plays more like a trapper, but also kind of like a rushdown. Okay, I want to say she's a rushdowner. She plays more like a trapper in a sense, but also still. But then again, even without her traps, she can still do pretty well. You know, obviously, if you utilize her right, she is pretty good. Although Tofu is definitely more fun to play as than Granny, in my opinion, Granny is actually not that bad as, well, the second starter antagonist. Let's start off with her stats and her abilities. So, as usual, she has a shit ton of health, and I believe she has 105 stamina. So, yeah. Now we get to her abilities. Her first ability is Swipe. Pretty self-explanatory. It's a basic attack. You attack and deal damage to the survivor. Next up is Come Here. When used, Granny will play a sound cue and play an animation where she rises her weapon up and will do a dash. If she hits a survivor, it will, slow them down. If you miss, however, as that ability, you will get slowed down too. So definitely be good at using this ability while aiming it. Next up is, Steel Trap. It's really just a bear trap. Obviously, you are meant to place it in pretty good, spots. Then we get the last ability, which is Spider Toss. When used, Granny will draw a spider, and the spider will start roaming around in a certain area. If a protagonist gets close enough, the spider will jump on them and will slow them down and will deal small chunks of damage to them. For a second starter antagonist, Granny is actually not that bad. Again, I like playing as Tofu more, and I also like to play as the third killer that we'll get into in a moment. But Granny is not that bad. I'm not really a Granny fan, but I will definitely say she is pretty good, just like the other starter antagonist, Tofu. Now, we get to the last antagonist, the one that I saved for last. The one that everyone will be familiar with because this guy is based on an avatar of a pretty big and popular Roblox YouTuber. A YouTuber that I don't really watch, but I can see why people really love this guy. Let's start off with none other than Cletus, the last and pretty cool antagonist for this game. Unlike the other two antagonists where you just unlock them for free, you actually have to grind in order to unlock Cletus. And trust me, he takes a while to unlock. He costs 900 money in order to unlock him. So definitely a one to grind for. But anyways, I can easily tell why people are really excited for this killer. Again, it is really based on, well, freaking Flamingo's Roblox avatar. Now, obviously, I don't really know much about Flamingo, considering I have never watched the content before, but I know a good, massive majority of the Roblox community really love Flamingo. So, a killer that is really based on, well, him, it's pretty fucking obvious why people are excited to play this update. Especially when I first played the update. Holy shit. You would not believe the amount of Cletuses I went up against as Survivor. I'm not kidding. Every game as Survivor I played, Cletus. Or really almost everybody was playing as Cletus. Again, I understand why though. Because it's Flamingo. Anyways, let's talk about his stats and, of course, his abilities. So, as usual, pretty much the same amount of stats as the other two killers. 105 stamina, I think, right? And a shit ton of health, pretty much. I don't think I need to really explain much about the stats at this point. Let's get to his actual abilities. Cletus' first ability is Banjo. It's his basic attack. He slings his, well, frying pan to deal damage to the survivor. Next up is his second ability, Submerge. When used, Cletus will submerge as a black puddle into the ground and can move freely in this state. This can be used to somewhat catch up to a survivor. However, use the ability wisely because it also drains your stamina, at least a little bit. When the ability ends, when you come out of it, you pretty much, well, come out of it. Again, this ability is pretty good for finding survivors pretty easily. I also want to bring up that Cletus does have a passive ability as well, is that when he does get stunned, he ends up revealing locations to survivors, I think, if I'm correct on that. Now we get to his third ability, and probably his most fun ability, and pretty much his most fun ability, Hunting. When used, Cletus will pull out his hunting rifle, and when used again, he will fire his rifle. However, you only get 3 chances to fire this thing. If you fire your third shot and miss, you pretty much will end up, well, Cletus will end up removing his weapon, and it goes on cooldown. However, if you end up hitting a shot with one of these shots, it will deal damage to the survivor, and Cletus will laugh and pull out his rifle, and it goes on cooldown. Again, this is a pretty fun ability. And hitting those long shots is also pretty satisfying too. Now we get to his last ability, his Trap. When used, Cletus will draw a block. And the block will basically just sit there until the survivor gets close enough. When the survivor gets close, the block will start laughing, which in this case is Flamingo laughing, and will attempt to explode. If the protagonist leaves in rage before it explodes, then it will stop attempting to explode. However, if the protagonist stays within range of the bomb for too long, it will explode and deal damage to survivors and give them slowness. Anyways, that's all I gotta talk about, good Mr. Flamingo. It is time to finally wrap up this review of this game. I guess it's a review? I don't know. It's just me talking about the game overall. But yeah, it's time to wrap things up and what I think about this game. And of course, along with the big update they released. In conclusion, Chronicles has much potential. And it's actually a really good and fun game when you actually get used to the characters and get used to mechanics overall. And also, the one thing I do want to bring up are the maps. The maps have their own separate objectives and such as well, which is pretty cool and unique. Um, so I want to talk about the things I like about this game and the things I don't really like much about this game. So, first thing starters, I really love the soundtrack of this game. The music, the composers did a really good job composing these music for this game. And holy shit, there is a ton of soundtracks in this game. I'm not kidding. Like, if you look at the characters, like, you can actually have the option to play, like, their LMS theme or their chase themes. I'm not kidding. This game has a ton of freaking soundtracks. And they're pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. Like, composers, you guys did a good job making those soundtracks for this game. It really, really well made soundtracks. Now, another thing I want to bring up is I actually like both the survivors and the killers. Even though the killer role is usually the most fun, because I really love the killer role, but I also enjoy playing survivor as well, especially when I get to play as, well, Needles the porcupine and just absolutely dominate the shit out of the killer, because Eddie's my main, so yeah. But overall, the other survivors are actually pretty good in their own way. Yes, despite the fact that I made a freaking Sargo C, all survivors are, again, they're all pretty good in their own ways. Like, if all of them are utilized well, they are definitely really, really good. And same can be said about the killers, or in this case, the antagonists. All the antagonists are really good in their own ways. Cletus, Glanny, and Tofu Boy, they're all really good killers in their own ways. They're all very strong enough to actually, well, be able to do well. I also want to bring up another thing that I actually enjoy playing the killer role as well, and I do like killer overall in this game. Unlike most Asyms that involve the stamina bar, usually games that are survivor sided, this game, the killer is actually pretty good to play as. Obviously, when you're new, you're not going to do well as first, but when you actually start getting good and utilize the killer well, yeah, the killer is actually really, really good and actually fun to play as. And it makes you really start to believe of what they are actually meant to be, which how killers should be in Asyms in general. The power role, which is exactly what this game is. Obviously, if you're going against a good team, you can easily get messed up, but if you are really good at playing as, well, the killer, you can still turn things around. Overall, I like the killers in this game. They really did a good job with each of the three antagonists and actually making them feel like the power role. Now, I also want to bring up the maps. The objectives are good. Each of the maps have their own unique objectives, although most of them tend to feel the same, at least in some cases. Um, what is the things I don't like about this game, though? Um, hmm. I'm gonna be honest. I think my least favorite thing about this game is probably the maps. Don't get me wrong. I have no problems with maps at all. I think my issue with the map is mainly just the layouts. You can't really do much. I don't know. I get me wrong. I don't have an issue with the maps. It's just there are times where, like, sometimes, like, there isn't really, like, I'm not saying they're too small or they're too big. Obviously, most of the maps are pretty good sizes. It's just the fact that you can't really loop that well. Most of the layers are just not very loopable that well. Especially in some cases for, like, again, the killer can just have ways to completely. That's another. Again, the killer is supposed to be the power role, so that's really no issue. I don't know. To be honest, not really my biggest issue. Really, maybe that's probably just a tiny nitpick. I don't know. Maybe that opinion will change as time goes on. That's probably just me exaggerating or something. But anyways, yeah. Overall, this game is pretty good. I love this game. I'm glad this game actually managed to get back up ever since the big update. Because my god, dude, I remember playing this game like again during its early stages. Dude, the game was really dead. Like barely anyone plays it at all. But then the big update dropped, and now like people are playing again. So I'm glad that this game actually managed to rise itself back up. Because this game really had potential, and I actually miss playing it too. So being able to actually play the game again because of this big update, really, really good. Really peak. Oh, and another thing I want to bring up. Do you guys also know that Crystal Chronicles did a collaboration with another Asym, Corrupted Crossroads? Yeah, I know. I found out when I looked at one of Granny's skins. Pretty cool. And I actually have the skin now because I decided to play Corrupted Crossroads, which, by the way, I played that game before. It's pretty good. Um, yeah. Overall, pretty great. I'm Blue Cyber Studios. I will catch you all next time. Peace out, everyone.